At the corner of 4th and Bates.
She absolutely was ahead of the curve.
Behind an ancient brick wall, just a few blocks from the heart of downtown Richmond. Right there, nestled among crumbling stones and time-worn tombs, you'll stumble across a bulky 2,000-pound chunk of Boston. An unusual monument marking the final resting place.
She was universally hated in the city.
Of one of the most significant but least known figures in American history.
This is a great story of a forgotten woman.
Elizabeth Van Lew, a woman who single-handedly changes the course of the country.
She defied gender, class, and race.
Her actions, though, make her arguably the most despised woman in Virginia.
She really put her life on the line.
In the years prior to the Civil War, the slave trade is flourishing in Richmond, a place where massive fortunes are gained, while entire families are broken up, sold at auction. Elizabeth Van Lew is born in 1818 into a wealthy, slave-owning household, a woman of means, living in the finest mansion on Church Hill.
She was accepted into a society. She was definitely a part of Richmond's elite.
But the Quaker-educated Van Lew comes to abhor the institution of humans owning humans. So she secretly starts freeing her slaves following her father's passing 20 years before the Emancipation Proclamation.
For a white person to do all that she did really was incredible.
Historian Dr. Laurinette Lee says the decision sets the unmarried Van Lew on a crash course with most of her fellow Virginians.
She was seen as someone that was almost a threat to Southern society.
At the outset of the Civil War, many Richmonders who oppose seceding from the Union flee north, but not Van Lew.
She believes that the slaveholders who argue on behalf of secession are hysterical.
In fact, she does not sit idly by watching the blue and the gray create a river of red. She plays an active role while war rages around her. Van Lew starts spending her entire fortune buying, freeing, and educating countless slaves.
She felt Virginians had a special duty to save the Union.
The 43-year-old also frequents the notorious Libby prison, aiding Union officers starving and suffering in squalor. She's not just ferrying food and medicine. Van Lew helps countless prisoners escape, hiding them in her own home.
That would have been seen as treason.
But Van Lew's greatest contribution to the Union's war effort remains top secret. With the South in open rebellion, Van Lew wages her own covert war. Her friends, working as servants in the homes of Confederate leaders, stealthily gather military intelligence.
There were people who were being executed for treason against the Confederacy in Richmond.
Van Lew and her clandestine network of a dozen black and white operatives risk life and limb.
They lived daily with the threat of death.
But when she's Elizabeth Van Lew in public, she pretends to be a loyal Confederate.
Elizabeth Varyn, author of Southern Lady, Yankee Spy.
Confederates know that they're Unionists who have orchestrated this, but they can't get them.
Richmond tour guide Sandy Bergman says Van Lew smuggles coded messages written in invisible ink to Union generals bearing down on Richmond.
She hollowed out eggshells and put messages in them.
While neighbors scoff at her anti-slavery position, no one thinks the diminutive Van Lew is capable of orchestrating such an effective spy ring that would help the North win the war.
The sexism of Confederate officials blinded them to her agency. She was a middle-aged spinster, as far as they were concerned.
After the guns fall silent and while the nation binds its wounds, the veil of secrecy is ripped from Van Lew's espionage machine. Former General, now President Grant, commends Van Lew and names her Postmistress of Richmond, a plum position wielding a lot of power. She hires newly emancipated African Americans and women to fill top positions.
When we think about civil rights leaders, we've not really thought about Elizabeth Van Lew.
She was a surprise and a shock.
The Virginia Historical Society's Caroline Legro.
I think that Richmonders weren't ready for her. I think she was somebody who was too far outside of her time, and the city hated it.
Labeled a traitor to the lost cause, the firebrand is threatened and bullied, but not deterred.
It says a great deal about her that she remained true to her cause.
Neighbors shun the eccentric Van Lew like the plague, forever calling her Crazy Bet.
I think that you can certainly feel an element of sadness when you look at her life.
Over time, she loses her wealth helping the Union war effort and freeing slaves. Van Lew falls on hard times.
And the only people who stick by her are the African Americans of Richmond.
Upon her death in 1900, Van Lew is buried in an unmarked grave in Shockoe Hill Cemetery. No monument erected in her honor. And the once grand Van Lew mansion demolished.
She was not on the right side to be celebrated.
Years after her death, Van Lew's abolitionist friends in New England helped secure her legacy.
Sometimes you'll go out there and find flowers on her grave, and we don't have any idea who's putting them there.
They shipped the massive stone and bronze plaque to Richmond, a delivery that makes bold headlines.
As a grave marker, it's interesting mostly in its simplicity.
Historians say a century and a half after Van Lew wrote her chapter in history, it's about time her story emerges from the shadows.
I think history will be kind to her, long-term history will be kind to her, and maybe she can come back, and maybe she's one of these kind of forgotten heroes that we no longer forget.
As for her hefty shrine, some say it's a fitting tribute to the woman who was as unyielding as a boulder.
I would think that we would want to remember what she has done, not only African Americans, but all of us.
Elizabeth Van Lew is taking her place among some of the top spies in history. Van Lew is part of the Sisterhood of Spies Gallery at the Spy Museum in Washington, D.C., where you can see a book with a passage written in Van Lew's own handwriting. The passage, "Keep your mouth shut and your eyes and ears open." I'm Greg McQuade, CBS 6 News.